Everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my favorite ways to add even more depth to your layered stencil images using selective ink blending and gradations. So I'm going to start by actually stamping the flowers. So I have the stamp set from the September My Monthly Hero Kit. I'm going to just kind of place the some flowers here on a piece of Dove White cardstock, and then I'll stamp them in the included Root Beer Reactive ink. This is a really awesome little ink cube that's included, one of 4 included in the kit. After I've stamped the flowers, I'm going to leave the flower stamp in my MISTI because I will stamp the flowers again. Here are the 5 stencils included in the kit, the 5 layering stencils. These ink blend a different section of your flowers to create a very an image with a lot of depth, but we are going to one-up it a little bit with selective ink blending and gradations. So once I have my stencil in place, I'm going to grab my pencil here and kind of mark down or color in where the registration marks are in the stencil. This is a really handy feature of these layering stencils, and then I just taped it in place. Now I'm going to ink blend real quickly with Butter Bar ink. This is included in the kit as well. It's just in the mini cube form, and I'm just ink blending kind of a base with these flowers. So this is what I call the flower base layer, and we will do a detail layer stencil after this. But first, I'm going to do a little bit of gradations here. So after I ink blended with the Butter Bar, moving on to a darker color, this is Creamsicle, and I'm kind of selective ink blending here where I'm starting in the center and working out to the petals a little bit. I definitely need to go beyond the centers because the centers will be colored with a different stencil layer. I want to get just a little bit of that Creamsicle on the petals to create a nice gradation on the petals. Now I'm going back to Butter Bar just to enhance the yellow a little bit more. Now I'll remove the stencils, and you can see my register marks there. I'm going to line up my second stencil, which is the flower detail stencil, over those register marks and then tape it in place. Now for this layer, I'm starting again with Butter Bar, just kind of building up that intensity even more, so we're creating more contrast, but this won't be as harsh because we are doing the gradations. So after I've kind of built up that Butter Bar layer, I'm moving on to Creamsicle again, starting at the center here and kind of blending out to create a gradation over the petals. And again, don't worry about the centers, we'll color those later. And I'm going to finish up with Fruit Punch, again starting at the center and moving out to those petals. I definitely want to get on those petals a little bit, and this will just kind of be the last touch to our gradation for our petals. Now I'll remove this stencil and grab our stencil ink that is for the center of our flowers. So just line it up to those register marks again, use some tape to hold it in place, and then we're going to start with Caramel, also included in the September My Monthly Hero Kit, and we're just going to simply ink blend nice and flat, no gradations here, the centers of the flowers first with Caramel. And after we get kind of that flat caramel down, then we'll move on to Root Beer. Now Root Beer is also included in the kit. It's what we stamped the flowers with in the very beginning, and here I'm going to try to ink just the outer edges of the flower centers with Root Beer, just to add a little bit of dark color to those edges, and that's going to really make these flower centers look kind of domed and rounded. It adds a lot of depth. This is a little tricky to do, but as long as you get just a little bit of that Root Beer kind of on to your flower centers, even if it's not right at the edges, it will add a lot, or really will enhance the add more interest and really enhance the look of your centers. Now we're going to move on to a new stencil. This is the stencil for the base of the leaves. I'm going to start with Key Lime Fizz here. This is also included in the kit, and just quickly ink blend these leaves with the Key Lime Fizz. I am doing a little bit of a gradation here, but it does kind of end up fairly flat, which is okay because I have 2 more additional ink colors that I'm going to introduce to really create a gradation. So my next color is Moss, and I'm going to start at the base of the leaves, so kind of where the leaves meet the flowers really, and then I will ink blend out again to create a little gradation. And after I finish with Moss, I'm going to go up one more level, so one more darker color here, which is Pine, and ink blend at the very base, so the very edge of the leaf, right where the leaves meet the flowers. Now that I've finished that, I have only one more stencil left to do. This last stencil is the detail layer for the leaves and the centers of the flowers. So once I get it in place here, I'll tape it down. And here I'm going to just kind of use the same colors I used before, but just intensify them. So I'm going to start with root beer for the flower centers and just quickly ink blend the centers. No gradations here, just coloring it in nice and flat. And then for the leaves, I'm going to start with moss, so my medium shade, and ink blend again, starting from the base of the leaves out to the tips, kind of get that a gradation going. And after I get the moss down, I'll finish up with pine, my darkest green, and again starting at the base of the leaves and blending out a little bit to also get that, continue that nice gradation. And once I finish that, we will actually be all done with our flowers. And I will hold up to the camera so you can see all the depth that we were able to get and how our gradations are really soft. So even though we use layering stencils, it has a very soft but rich look. Like you can really see the dimension, the faux dimension. Almost looks like it was Copic colored. So now I'm going to pop my flowers back into my Misty and stamp them one more time in that root beer. This just makes sure all those detail lines from the stamp really kind of pop. So you kind of lose those a little bit when you ink blend, and that just really helps. So I went ahead, since my flowers are done, and die cut them out with the matching frame cuts. And now we're going to move on to our sentiment. I have the 2 Hello word dies that are included in the kit. When you get them, they're not snipped. If you happen to not snip them or separate them, this would be really easy, but I just popped them back in and die cut a hello out of white cardstock, and I'm actually going to only use the outline. Definitely save the interior hello, which I'm not going to use on today's card, but you definitely could use it on another card. But I want that outline that you see there. So I'm actually going to repeat that process and do that 5 more times. So I have 5 hello outlines. And now I have everything kind of temporarily arranged in my Misty, so I can figure out my placement for my sub sentiment. This sentiment is from the included stamp set. I'm going to heat emboss, so I did apply some anti-static powder. And now I'll ink up my sentiment in embossing watermark ink, stamp it onto my card front. And this is an A2 top folding sand card base. And then I'll just dip it into the white embossing powder and of course just heat set with my heat tool. So after my sub sentiment is heat set, I'm actually ready to kind of bring this whole card together. So here are my flowers, and you can see my 5 hello outlines already die cut and ready to go. I'm going to position my flowers in the upper left corner, use a piece of tape to kind of hold them in place while I trim off the overhang with my scissors. And after I got that trimmed, I'll then go ahead and add a little bit of dimension to these flowers. So I'm not going to use foam adhesive for dimension. I'm going to use cardstock, actually stacked cardstock, because then I have a lot of control over how dimensional it is. And I'm just going to stack 2 layers of cardstock together. This is just scrap cardstock, and then I'll adhere those stacked pieces to the back side of my flowers. This is a little bit less dimension than maybe foam adhesive, but it's going to allow me to make sure my word die cut really is lined up and leveled nicely with my flowers. So I'm going to just adhere those down and then use a plate from my die cutting machine to kind of hold it in place while I move on to my word dies, or my word die cut. So I have 3 layers here that I'm going to stack up, but first I have to trim off the H's, or a little bit of the H from all 3 of these layers, because this is where they are going to overlap the sunflowers. So after I've trimmed off that kind of top part of the H, I'm ready to glue these together. I'm going to use some liquid adhesive, just apply it, almost all over that die cut. And because liquid adhesive can get everywhere, I'm just going to tap it off, that adhesive off onto some scrap paper, and then place one of my trimmed hellos right on top. So just line it up, and it does get a little warped here, but that's okay. We will straighten out this word die cut when we add the final 2 layers. The final 2 layers won't be cut. So now I'm going to move on to my 3rd trimmed hello, add liquid adhesive to it, After I add the adhesive, I will kind of remove the excess just like I did before by pressing it onto some scrap cards or scrap paper, and then I'll place it right on top of my already stacked trimmed hellos. And right now it's 3 levels or 3 layers thick, which is exactly the same thickness of my flowers, because I have my flowers and my 2 stacked pieces of cardstock for dimension. So the trimmed hello and the flowers are the same. Now I'm going to move on to my final 2 hellos, my untrimmed ones, and just adhere them together. Again, removing the extra adhesive. That really helps a lot so you don't get glue kind of everywhere. And then I'll finish by adding glue to the backside of my untrimmed hellos, my untrimmed stacked hellos. Again, for the final time, just remove that extra adhesive on my scrap paper and then add them to the trimmed stacked hellos. And this is actually a 5 layered hello, so it's very dimensional, but it's very secure and well supported. Even though it's kind of thin, it's well supported thanks to all the layers and it overlapping the stacked flowers as well, so it really is nice and secure. So I just added glue to the backside, stuck it down, and that actually completes my card. So I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at the finished card. I just love how these sunflowers turned out. There's tons of depth there. They honestly look like I Copic colored them and did the best Copic coloring of my life, but it was so easy to do with the layering stencils. Those are so fun. And I think that stacked sentiment adds some nice dimension, and that beautiful sub sentiment just kind of brings it all together. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.